Good afternoon. This is Dr. Thomas Klein coming to you from Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm now officially with the National Pain Council as the Director for Medical Sciences. I'm going to be pretty much doing this full time until we get people back on their medications that were discontinued at the request of the government. Specifically the CDC, and specifically at the request of consultants to the CDC, the physicians for responsible opioid prescribing. There's really no one else in the country, no physician groups, no federal agencies, that suggested people successfully treated with opiate regimens should be discontinued. So this is an aberrant, bizarre happening that's had an effect on, we think, 7 to 8 million people. We are starting to let the government know that, see if I can find it here. We're letting the government know how many people are involved. They've been denying it. They've not done any studies. They've not done any follow-ups. And they should have, because the CDC was told in January, 3 months before their guidelines came out, by their board of scientific advisors to be sure to follow up for any untoward consequences. And of course that's happened over the past 4 years, and they've been ignoring it. It looks like less than 20% of the 10 million people in the United States who have painful diseases are now receiving appropriate amount of their medications. It has been a wildfire of ignorance that has never been seen before in the history of medicine, because it's been done on purpose. Sure, lots of bad things have happened. We've had pandemics, etc., but this was on purpose. People were taken off their medicines on purpose. And they were taken off for the wrong reason. The assumption is that if you put a lot of opiates out there, you're going to create a lot of addictions. That's not true. As a matter of fact, it will create no addictions. We have several papers which we're going to be gathering together and presenting to show that addiction has not increased at all since 1920. And certainly has not increased recently, with all this hysteria about all these opioids out there floating around, ready to addict, ready to sneak into a person's soul and turn them into a dope fiend. But the truth is, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because you will have information that nobody else has. We've put this information out there because it's new. People don't want to accept it, especially not doctors. So here are the facts. And we at the National Pain Council and the JATH, which I still work for, have really gotten very, very close to 100%. I spoke with Dr. Peter Grinspoon today, who wrote the book Free, F-R-E-E, Refills. He suddenly became addicted as a physician when he was given some pain medicines for pain. And I talked to him and I asked him, I said, Peter, what was your first pill like? Guess what he said? He went to the moon. And this is what we're finding with all the people with opiate addiction disease. Now remember, opiate addiction disease is different than alcohol addiction, marijuana addiction, cocaine addiction, and methamphetamine addictions. Those are different. They are not controlled by genes that are hardwired in the brain like this disease. So this is the key question people need to ask themselves. Doctors need to ask, but they don't know this yet, so you can ask it for them. Emergency rooms need to ask. Post-operative need to ask. Because the way it works, 1/2 of 1%, about 1 in 250 people, will addict on the very first pill. So that makes the diagnosis. If you've had opiates before and you did okay, you don't have the gene, you're going to be good the rest of your life. So, this is very important for teenagers because 90% of opiate addiction starts in the teenage years. Why is that? Oh, there's something wrong with their brain. No, there's nothing wrong with their brains. Their brains are fine. What's going on is that they are going to parties and they are receiving opiates at the party, and that's oxycodone, hydrocodone, and promethazine, which is going around now as a purple haze drink, Percocets, Vicodin. Those are all opiates. And every kid and every high school and every counselor and every parent should know what the drugs are that are opiates. Telling people not to take drugs is not going to work. And didn't work in the past, it's not going to work now. We have in this country the largest percentage of illicit drug users in the world. When cocaine was going around, they thought that more than half of the people in Wall Street were snorting cocaine during lunch. So that's just it. There's nothing I can do to change that, nor you. We have a drug-taking society. Teenagers and young people will go to parties and there'll be pills all over the place. And I want to try this. Okay, we're not going to stop that from happening. But teenagers and parents of teenagers and counselors need to know that if a teenager's at a party or a teenager's getting their first opiate from a doctor, if the first pill, like Dr. Grinspoon, would go to the moon, you've just diagnosed yourself with having opiate addiction disease. You cannot prevent this kind of addiction because it's genetic. Can you prevent alcoholism and addiction to marijuana? Sure you can. Those can be prevented by limiting supply, but not with this drug. That's the big mistake the government has made. They're arresting doctors. They're putting people in jail for having paraphernalia, all because they think that more stuff out there will create more dope fiends, and the government is very, very frightened about dope fiends because they're immoral. Back in 1900, they were classified as immoral, and that's what we think now, deep down inside. Okay, I think I mentioned I'd had a discussion with my dentist, and I said, "Are you giving out opiates?" And he said, "Well, no, with all this stuff, we're afraid." I said, "All you gotta do is ask this question. Have you ever had an opiate before?" And if they say yes, and I didn't have any problem with it, then they're good forever. So the big myth out there is the longer you take opiates, the more likely you are to become addicted. Wrong. The reason it's wrong, it was based on the wrong type of addiction. It was based on the addictions that we talk about as type 1, alcohol, most alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, and amphetamines. Those will develop more and more of a behavioral, social, psychosocial addiction the more you take, but not with opiates. Opiates are an exception. None of these other drugs do you develop an addiction the first time you take them. This is what's peculiar about this. Okay, so you all have information that nobody else has in this country. It's been out there, but people don't like to change their minds. And so this is directly for you and your teenagers. And you should have a discussion with your teenagers just like you have discussions about sex and about HIV and about everything else. And it is, if you are exposed to an opiate pill, it doesn't have to be where. It could be at the doctor's office or under other circumstances, and you go to the moon, or you're watching your friend go to the moon, that's a potentially fatal disease starting. Because if you don't control it, people end up on the streets and die. I had somebody working here from high school, and she had 1,000 students at her high school. 4 of them died of overdoses. The incidence of this gene is 4 per 1,000. Right on the money. So what happened, the 4 that we would expect who are going to addict did in fact addict, but nobody talked about it. See, they hid and shame, and they wanted to get more. I mean, this makes you feel so good, you really just want to get some more. That's why it's very important on the very first pill to stop. Because, like Dr. Grinspoon, he couldn't stop, right? He was a doctor. He lost his license. He loved practicing medicine. Why didn't he stop? You can't stop. That's part of opiate addiction. But you can stop if you catch it right away. And if you catch it right away, there doesn't need to be any more teenagers turning up dead from opioid overdoses. If you have any questions, you can pose them at the National Pain Council. There's a little place there if you go to the website where you can put questions in. You can also go to the website, which is National Pain Council at gmail.com. And last push, and last little sales pitch is we are trying to let Congress know, let the CDC know how much damage has been done by the CDC and by PROP. And if you go to this website, you will get information on how to write letters. If 1% of the people in this country that have been screwed by the CDC and PROP, 1% would be 80,000 letters. 1%. So get on the ball, go here, and write a letter and be counted. We are trying to get a count. The government has no idea the extent of damage that they've caused. They think, oh, must just be a few people. Nope. And with that, I will say good night.